She was serving drinks on the cruise at midnight when the billionaire saw his missing daughter's bracelet on her wrist and he froze. The champagne glasses clinked like wind chimes as Evelyn Marlowe weaved through the crowd. Her tray balanced perfectly despite the ship's gentle rocking. 25 years old, and she'd already mastered the art of being invisible. That's what they wanted anyway. The millionaires lounging on velvet chairs, dripping in diamonds and designer suits. They wanted their drinks refilled, their caviar refreshed, and absolutely zero eye contact with the help. She didn't mind. Invisibility was safer. Miss, another scotch when you get a chance. The man didn't even look up from his phone. Right away, sir. Evelyn's voice was practiced, pleasant, empty. She'd perfected that tone over the years. In foster home number 3, when Mrs. Peterson wanted her to speak properly. In foster home number 5, when the Hayes family told her she was too sullen. In foster home number 7, when they'd finally just stopped talking to her altogether before sending her back. Problematic, distant, incapable of connecting. The words followed her like ghosts. The Ocean Star was one of those mega cruise ships that rich people booked when they wanted to feel adventurous without actually experiencing any discomfort. Evelyn had worked here for 8 months now, pulling double shifts whenever she could. Every dollar went into the same battered envelope she kept under her mattress in the cramped crew quarters below deck. $3,000. $247 so far. She needed $5,000 to hire the private investigator she'd found online. Some guy in Baltimore who specialized in cold cases and missing persons. $5,000 to maybe, finally, get some answers about who she was, where she came from, why nobody wanted her. The silver bracelet on her wrist caught the light as she set down a fresh scotch. She touched it instinctively, the way she always did when her thoughts wandered down that particular rabbit hole. The delicate chain, the rose-shaped pendant. It was the only thing that proved she'd existed before the age of 3 months. The nuns at St. Bridget's orphanage had found it tied around her tiny wrist when someone left her in a soaked cardboard box on their doorstep during a rainstorm. Your only clue, Sister Margaret had told her years later, her voice heavy with pity. Someone wanted you to have it, child. That means something. But what? What the hell did it mean when that same someone had thrown her away like garbage? Evelyn, you good. Marcus, another server, passed by with an empty tray. You've got that look again. What look? The one where you're about to punch a hole through a wall. She forced a smile. I'm fine. Just tired. You're always tired. When's the last time you took a day off? Can't afford days off. She adjusted her tray and headed back toward the bar. Outside the massive windows, the Caribbean night was turning nasty. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, and the waves were getting choppier. The captain had warned them earlier. Tropical storm moving in faster than expected. Nothing dangerous, just uncomfortable, perfect metaphor for her entire life. The ship lurched slightly, and someone's martini sloshed onto the marble floor. Evelyn was there in seconds with a cloth, wiping it up before anyone could complain. Another invisible task completed by an invisible person. She caught her reflection in one of the gold-framed mirrors as she stood. Tired eyes, dark circles she'd tried to cover with makeup. Brown hair pulled back so tight it gave her a headache. She looked like someone who was running on fumes. She looked like someone who'd been running her whole life. The worst part, she didn't even know what she was running from, or toward, back in the crew quarters that night. Well, technically morning since her shift didn't end until 2 a.m. Evelyn sat on her narrow bunk and counted the money again. $3,247. She'd been counting it every night for weeks, as if the number might magically increase if she just checked one more time. Her roommate, Angela, was already asleep, snoring softly in the bunk above. Angela was nice enough, but she'd stopped asking Evelyn personal questions after the first week. Most people did. There was something about Evelyn that made people uncomfortable, like they could sense the walls she'd built and decided it wasn't worth the effort to climb them. She was fine with that. Walls kept you safe. Evelyn turned the bracelet around her wrist, studying it in the dim light. She'd done this 1,000 times, looked for hidden inscriptions, secret compartments, anything that might give her a clue. There was nothing, just a simple silver chain and a rose pendant, slightly tarnished with age. Who were you? She thought. Not for the first time. And why wasn't I enough? 7 families, 7 different last names she'd tried on like ill-fitting clothes. The Johnsons kept her for 3 months before deciding she was too withdrawn. The Petersons made it 6 months before concluding she had attachment issues. The Hayes family, the ones she'd actually started to like, returned her after a year when they got pregnant with their own biological child. "We just think it's better this way," Mrs. Hayes had said, not quite meeting Evelyn's eyes. "A fresh start for everyone." Translation: "We're getting a real daughter now. We don't need the broken one anymore." By the time she aged out of the system at 18, Evelyn had learned the most important lesson of her life. Don't get attached. Don't hope. Don't expect. Just survive. She was good at surviving. The ship rocked harder now, the storm definitely picking up somewhere above. She could hear the creaking of the vessel adjusting to the rougher seas. Tomorrow she had another double shift. Breakfast service at 6, then straight through to the VIP lounge for the evening crowd. The VIP lounge was where the real money hung out. The ones who'd paid extra for private dining and exclusive service. She hated working VIP. Those people looked through her like she was made of glass. But the tips were better, and she needed every penny. Just $1,800 more and she could hire that investigator. Just $1,800 more and maybe, finally, she'd get some answers. Maybe she'd find out she had a mother somewhere who'd been searching for her. Maybe there was some tragic explanation, some reason that would make sense of the abandonment. Or maybe she'd find out the truth was exactly what she'd always suspected, that she'd been unwanted from the very beginning, that there was something fundamentally wrong with her that made her unlovable. Evelyn tucked the money back under her mattress and lay down, still wearing her uniform because she was too exhausted to change. The bracelet pressed against her chest as she curled onto her side. Through the small porthole, she could see lightning flashing in the distance. Tomorrow would be another day of smiling at strangers, serving people who'd never see her as human, and counting down the dollars until she could afford to chase a past that probably didn't want to be found. But tomorrow would also bring something else. Something impossible. Something that would shatter everything she thought she knew about herself. Tomorrow, Thomas Whitaker would walk into the VIP lounge and see a bracelet he'd thought was lost forever. Tomorrow, 2 lives that had been torn apart 25 years ago would collide in the middle of a storm. Tomorrow, Evelyn Marlowe would discover that she hadn't been abandoned at all. She'd been stolen. Thomas Whitaker stood at the window of his suite, watching the storm gather strength over the dark waters. At 51, he'd built an empire. Luxury resorts dotting coastlines from California to the Carolinas. Hotels that catered to people who measured wealth in generations rather than dollars. His name opened doors. His reputation preceded him. His bank account had more zeros than most people would see in a lifetime. None of it mattered. He pressed his palm against the glass, feeling the cold seep through. The ship rocked beneath his feet, but he barely noticed. He'd been on rougher seas. Hell, he'd been living in rougher seas for 25 years. On the mahogany desk behind him, next to his laptop and stack of contracts he should have been reviewing, sat a single photograph in a silver frame. He didn't need to look at it. The image was burned into his brain, carved into his soul. Eleanor in a hospital bed, exhausted but radiant, cradling their newborn daughter. The baby's tiny fist was curled against Eleanor's chest, and on that impossibly small wrist, barely visible in the photo, was a silver bracelet with a rose pendant, custom-made, one of a kind, a gift he'd commissioned from a jeweler in Baltimore, designed specifically for his daughter who'd lived for exactly 4 hours before vanishing into thin air. Thomas turned away from the window and poured himself the scotch he didn't want. The burn in his throat was familiar, almost comforting. 25 years, and he could still remember every detail of that night. The worst night of his life, the night that split his existence into before and after. Eleanor had been in labor for 19 hours. Complications, the doctors said. They'd tried to stay calm, professional, but Thomas had seen the worry in their eyes. Then came the hemorrhaging. So much blood. Too much blood. They'd gotten the baby out. A perfect little girl with Eleanor's dark hair and his nose. But they couldn't save his wife. "I'm sorry, Mr. Whitaker." The doctor's voice had been gentle, practiced. How many times had he delivered that particular sentence? "We did everything we could." Thomas had been 26 years old, holding his daughter in the hospital corridor, trying to process that Eleanor was gone, just gone. The love of his life, his partner, his everything. reduced to paperwork and condolences and a body in the morgue that he had to identify. He'd been signing forms in a daze, death certificate, organ donation papers, funeral arrangements. When the nurse had taken the baby back to the nursery, "Just while you finish up, Mr. Whitaker. She'll be right there when you're ready." 20 minutes. That's how long he'd left her alone. 20 goddamn minutes. When he'd gone to the nursery, she was gone. The bassinet was empty. The nurses were frantic. Security was called. Cameras were reviewed. And there on the grainy footage was Frances Delaney, night shift nurse, walking out of the hospital with a bundle in her arms at 2:47 a.m. She never came back to work, never went home to her apartment, just vanished, taking Thomas's daughter with her. The investigation had been immediate but useless. Frances Delaney had no family, no close friends, no obvious connections. She'd worked at the hospital for 3 years with a spotless record. No red flags, no warning signs. She'd simply walked out the door with a stolen baby and disappeared into the night. Thomas had hired every investigator he could find. Private detectives, former FBI agents, specialists in missing children. He'd offered rewards that made headlines. 50,000, then 100,000, then 500,000. He'd appeared on news programs, put up billboards, created a website. He'd personally visited every orphanage, every adoption agency, every children's home in California and the surrounding states. Nothing. It was like his daughter had never existed. Except she had. Thomas had held her. He'd counted her fingers and toes. He'd whispered promises to her about the life they'd have together. He'd named her Rose, after the flower Eleanor had loved. Rose Whitaker, his daughter. His little girl, gone. The guilt was worse than the grief. If he hadn't left her alone, if he'd hired private security for the hospital room, if he'd insisted Eleanor deliver at a different hospital with better protocols. If. The years had blurred together after that. He'd thrown himself into work because it was the only thing that dulled the pain. Built his first resort at 28, his first hotel chain by 32, bought out competitors, expanded territories, grew the business until Whitaker Luxury Group became synonymous with opulence. Every success felt hollow. Every milestone was just another reminder that he'd failed at the only thing that mattered. He'd dated occasionally. Well-meaning friends set him up. Business associates invited him to dinners where attractive women just happened to be seated nearby. Nothing stuck. How could it? There was a hole in his chest where his family should have been, and no amount of champagne conversations or carefully orchestrated romances could fill it. Every year on Rose's birthday, Thomas visited Eleanor's grave and left 25 roses, one for each year his daughter had been missing. Every year, he updated the missing persons report, though the police had long since moved on to cases with actual leads. Every year, he looked at that photograph and wondered, was she alive? Was she happy? Did she know she'd been wanted? Desperately, by a father who'd spent a quarter-century searching for her? Or had Frances Delaney, in some fit of madness, done the unthinkable? Thomas couldn't let himself go there. Wouldn't. Rose was alive. She had to be. He'd feel it if she wasn't. Some fundamental shift in the universe, some cosmic signal that his daughter was gone. That's what he told himself anyway, late at night when the scotch wasn't working and the guilt threatened to drown him. His phone buzzed on the desk. Jonathan, his business partner, texting about tomorrow's meeting with potential investors. Thomas ignored it. He'd come on this cruise for work. Some luxury hospitality conference, networking opportunities, the usual song and dance. But his heart wasn't in it. His heart hadn't been in much of anything for 25 years. The storm outside was really picking up now. Lightning split the sky, briefly illuminating the churning ocean. Thomas finished his scotch and poured another. Sleep wouldn't come easy tonight. It rarely did. He picked up the photograph, running his thumb over the glass. Eleanor looked so happy in that picture, so proud. She'd fought like hell to bring Rose into the world. 19 hours of labor, complications, bleeding, and she'd never once complained. She just kept pushing, kept fighting, because she wanted their baby to live. And she had. Rose had lived. Thomas had to believe that. Had to believe that somewhere out there, his daughter was alive. Maybe she'd been adopted by a good family. Maybe she had a happy life, a loving home, everything Eleanor would have wanted for her. Or maybe she was lost. Like him, maybe she'd spent 25 years wondering who she was, where she came from, why she'd been abandoned. She hadn't been abandoned, though. She'd been stolen, ripped away from a father who'd loved her from the moment he knew she existed. A father who'd spent every day since trying to find her. Thomas set the photograph back on the desk and stared at it for a long moment. Tomorrow he'd go through the motions, attend the conference, smile at investors, talk about expansion plans and quarterly projections. He'd play the part of the successful billionaire, the hospitality mogul, the man who had everything. And tomorrow night, like every night, he'd come back to his suite and stare at that photograph and wonder. But tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, fate would intervene in a way that Thomas couldn't have imagined in his wildest dreams. Tomorrow, a server would walk into the VIP lounge wearing a bracelet that shouldn't exist. Tomorrow, after 25 years of searching, Thomas Whitaker would find his daughter. He just didn't know it yet. The ship pitched in the storm, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the water like a promise. The storm had turned the ocean star into a floating nightmare by evening. Evelyn gripped her tray tighter as the ship rolled, champagne flutes clinking dangerously close to the edge. She'd worked through rough seas before, but this was different. The waves were angry tonight, slamming against the hull with enough force to make even the seasoned crew members look nervous. "You good?" Marcus asked, as they passed each other in the narrow service corridor. "Define good." Evelyn steadied herself against the wall as another wave hit. "I've got VIP lounge duty in 5 minutes and I can barely walk straight. Rather you than me. Those people get mean when the boat rocks their martinis." He grinned and disappeared toward the main dining room. Evelyn took a breath and pushed through the ornate doors into the VIP lounge. Soft jazz played over hidden speakers. Barely audible over the storm outside, the room was half empty. Most guests had retreated to their cabins to ride out the weather, but a handful remained, the kind of people who refused to let something as trivial as a tropical storm interrupt their evening. She recognized a few faces from previous shifts, a tech CEO from Seattle, an actress whose name she couldn't remember, a couple celebrating their 30th anniversary, and in the corner, seated alone at a table near the windows, a man she'd seen boarding yesterday but never served, Thomas Whitaker. She'd heard the crew talking about him. Some hospitality mogul worth more money than God. He looked the part. Expensive suit, salt and pepper hair perfectly styled, the kind of watch that probably cost more than her yearly salary. But there was something else. Something in the way he stared out at the storm, his scotch untouched, his shoulders carrying weight that had nothing to do with his tailored jacket. He looked haunted. "Evelyn, table 7 needs refills." Sandra, the senior server, barely glanced up from her tablet. "And the gentleman in the corner ordered another scotch 10 minutes ago. Get on it." "Right work." Evelyn loaded her tray and made her way across the room, her feet automatically adjusting to the ship's movement. Years of practice, she served table 7 first. More champagne, forced smiles, tips that would probably be mediocre because rich people somehow became stingier when the weather got bad. Then she approached the corner table. "Excuse me, sir, your scotch." Thomas didn't respond at first. He was somewhere else entirely, staring at the storm like it held answers to questions he'd been asking for years. Evelyn cleared her throat softly and tried again. "Sir, your drink." This time he turned, and Evelyn caught a glimpse of his face in the low light, tired eyes, sad eyes, the kind of sadness that had settled in deep and made itself at home. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice rough. He reached for his wallet, probably to tip her, and that's when it happened. That's when everything changed. Thomas's eyes dropped to her wrist as she set down the glass. The exact moment he saw the bracelet, his entire body went rigid. The color drained from his face so fast, Evelyn thought he might pass out. His hand froze halfway to his wallet, trembling. "Where?" His voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again, desperation bleeding through every word. "Where did you get that bracelet?" Evelyn instinctively pulled her wrist back, her defenses slamming into place. She'd gotten weird comments about the bracelet before, people asking where she'd bought it, how much it cost. Stupid questions from bored passengers who thought making small talk with the help was charitable. But this wasn't that. This was something else entirely. "It's mine," she said, her tone careful. "Why? Thomas stood so abruptly his chair scraped against the floor. Other guests glanced over, curious. He didn't seem to notice. His eyes were locked on the bracelet like it was the only thing in the room. "Please," the word came out strangled. "I need to know. Where did you get it?" The ship lurched violently, and Evelyn had to grab the table to keep from falling. Her tray clattered to the floor, empty glasses shattering. She barely registered it. This man, this stranger, was looking at her like she held the key to something vital, something he'd been searching for his entire life. "I've always had it," she heard herself say. "It was with me when I was abandoned. I was a baby." The sound Thomas made wasn't quite a sob, wasn't quite a gasp. It was something raw and broken, the sound of a man whose entire world had just shifted on its axis. He reached out like he wanted to touch the bracelet, then stopped himself, his hand shaking so badly he had to grip the edge of the table. "Can I?" He swallowed hard. "Can I see it? Please? I need to see it up close." Every instinct screamed at Evelyn to walk away. This was crazy. He was crazy. Rich people were always weird, but this was next level. Yet something in his voice, in those desperate eyes, made her hesitate. Sandra appeared at her elbow. "Everything okay here?" "Fine," Thomas said without looking away from Evelyn. "I just need a moment, please." Sandra shot Evelyn a questioning look. Evelyn gave a tiny nod, and Sandra reluctantly moved away to deal with the broken glasses. The other guests had lost interest, returning to their conversations. Slowly, carefully, Evelyn extended her wrist. Thomas's hands were shaking as he gently turned the bracelet, examining it from every angle. His breathing had gone shallow and fast when he found what he was looking for, the inside of the rose pendant. A sound escaped him that made Evelyn's chest tighten. "Oh my God." Tears were streaming down his face now. No attempt to hide them. "Oh my God, Eleanor. It's her. It's really her." "Who's Eleanor?" Evelyn whispered, her heart pounding. "I don't understand." Thomas released her wrist and fumbled for his wallet with shaking hands. He pulled out a worn photograph, creased from years of handling, and held it out. "This is Eleanor, my wife. She died giving birth to our daughter 25 years ago." Evelyn took the photo, a beautiful woman in a hospital bed, exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny newborn, and there, clearly visible on the baby's wrist, was an identical bracelet. The room tilted, and it had nothing to do with the storm. "No," the word came out automatically. "No, that's not possible. I was abandoned. I don't have parents." "You weren't abandoned." Thomas's voice broke completely. "You were stolen, taken from the hospital while I was signing your mother's death certificate. I've spent 25 years looking for you. Every single day. I never stopped." Evelyn backed away, her mind refusing to process what he was saying. This wasn't real. Couldn't be real. She was an orphan. She'd always been an orphan. 7 families had sent her back because something was wrong with her, because she was broken, because she was... "The inscription," Thomas said desperately, seeing her retreat. "There's a hidden compartment in the pendant. I had it custom made. Turn the base of the rose clockwise." Her hands were shaking so badly she almost couldn't do it, but she found the tiny mechanism she'd never known existed, and the base of the rose clicked open. Inside was a minuscule recording device. Old technology, barely functional. Thomas pulled out his phone, found an adapter he apparently carried everywhere, and connected the tiny chip. Static crackled. Then a voice emerged. Young, warm, full of love. "Hi, baby girl. I'm your daddy and this is your mama." A woman's voice, soft and tired. "We recorded this before you were born because we wanted you to always know how much we love you. You're our little rose. And you're going to be so loved." Evelyn's knees gave out. Thomas caught her, his arms strong despite his age, and they sank into chairs together. Around them, the storm raged on, but neither of them noticed. "I don't understand," Evelyn managed, her voice small and lost. "I've been in the system my whole life. Foster homes, orphanages. Nobody wanted me. How can you be?" "I wanted you." Thomas's voice was fierce through his tears. "I wanted you more than anything in the world. Someone took you from me. Someone stole my daughter. And I've been searching every single day since." The VIP lounge continued buzzing around them. oblivious passengers sipping drinks and checking phones. Sandra hovered nearby, clearly unsure whether to intervene. The ship pitched and rolled, and Evelyn Marlowe's entire existence shattered and reformed in the span of heartbeats. She had a father. She'd always had a father. He'd been looking for her. She wasn't broken. She wasn't unwanted. She'd been stolen. The DNA test took 3 days to process. 3 days that felt like 3 lifetimes. Evelyn had agreed to it in a daze, still reeling from Thomas's revelation. He'd arranged everything. A private lab in Savannah, expedited processing, confidentiality agreements. Money opened doors quickly when you had enough of it. They'd taken the samples right there on the ship. A technician arriving within hours despite the storm. Now came the waiting. Thomas had booked her a guest suite on the same deck as his, insisting she couldn't go back to the crew quarters. "Not until we know," he'd said, and Evelyn was too shell-shocked to argue. The suite was bigger than any apartment she'd ever lived in. King-sized bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, marble bathroom, a balcony overlooking the ocean. She'd spent the first night sitting on that balcony, watching the storm finally break, unable to sleep. Her mind kept circling back to the photograph. The recording, the look in Thomas's eyes when he'd seen the bracelet. You were stolen. How was that possible? How did a baby just disappear from a hospital? And if it was true, if she really was his daughter, then what did that mean? Who was she? Who had she been for 25 years? The questions made her head pound. By morning, Thomas had knocked on her door with coffee and pastries from the ship's restaurant. "I didn't know how you take it," he'd said, offering 3 different cups. "So I got everything." Evelyn had taken the black coffee, mainly because her hands needed something to hold. They'd sat in awkward silence in her suite's living room, 2 strangers who might be family, both terrified of what the test would reveal. "Tell me about the families," Thomas had finally said. "The ones who had you. Why?" "Because I need to know. I need to know what happened to you while I was looking." Evelyn had almost refused. Almost told him it was none of his business, that she didn't owe him her story, but something in his face, the desperate need to understand, to piece together the years he'd missed, made her talk. She told him about the Johnsons, who'd sent her back after 3 months because she had nightmares and wouldn't stop crying, about the Petersons, who'd wanted a grateful, affectionate child and got a wary, quiet one instead, about the Hayes family, the ones she'd actually started to bond with, who'd returned her when Mrs. Hayes got pregnant. "A fresh start for everyone," Evelyn had said, her voice flat. "That's what they told me." Thomas's jaw had clenched so tight, she could see the muscles working. "They were supposed to love you. All of them. You were a child. I wasn't what they wanted. You were exactly what I wanted." His voice had broken. "You were everything." The conversation had ended there, both of them too raw to continue. Thomas had left, and Evelyn had spent the rest of the day staring at the ceiling, unable to process any of it. Day 2 was worse. The waiting felt physical now, like something crawling under her skin. Thomas kept texting, asking if she needed anything, if she wanted company, if she'd eaten. Evelyn responded minimally. She didn't know how to talk to this man who claimed to be her father. She'd ventured out of the suite once, needing air, and run into Marcus in the corridor. "Holy shit, Evelyn, where have you been? Sandra's been freaking out. You missed 2 shifts." "I know, I'm sorry. Something came up." Marcus had studied her face. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Maybe she had. The ghost of a life she'd never known she was supposed to have. "I'm fine. Just dealing with some personal stuff. Must be serious if management is letting you skip shifts without getting fired." She'd almost laughed at that. Management wasn't letting her do anything. Thomas Whitaker had probably paid them enough money to make her employment status irrelevant. The thought made her uncomfortable in ways she couldn't articulate. That afternoon, Thomas had shown up at her door again, this time carrying a thick manila folder. "I thought you might want to see these," he'd said. "The investigation files. Everything I did to try to find you." Evelyn had hesitated, then let him in. They'd spent 3 hours going through documents, police reports from the night she was taken, statements from hospital staff, hundreds of pages detailing Thomas's search, orphanages visited, adoption agencies contacted, private investigators hired. There were photos of children who might have been her, little girls in grainy pictures, their faces circled in red marker. None of them had been right. None of them had been Rose. I went to St. Bridget's, Thomas said, pointing to a report dated 6 months after she'd been abandoned there. The investigator visited, talked to the nuns, but your paperwork said you were born in Vermont, not San Francisco. The birth date was off by 3 weeks. The mother's name was fake, Frances Delaney, Evelyn said quietly, reading the name from one of the reports. The nurse who took you, she was smart, created a whole false identity for you, moved you across state lines. By the time my people got to the right orphanage, your paperwork made you look like a completely different child. Evelyn stared at a photo of St. Bridget's, taken 25 years ago. The same stone building she remembered from her earliest memories. Thomas had been there. He'd been so close. Why did she do it? Evelyn asked. Why take me? I don't know. The police thought maybe she'd lost a child and snapped. Or maybe she was working for someone. We never found out. She disappeared completely. The anger that surged through Evelyn was unexpected and overwhelming. This woman, this stranger, had stolen her entire life, had taken her from a father who wanted her and thrown her into a system that treated her like damaged goods. I'm sorry, Thomas said quietly. I'm so sorry I didn't find you. I should have... Stop. Evelyn's voice came out sharper than intended. You can't apologize for something that wasn't your fault. Then whose fault was it? I left you alone in that nursery. I let this happen. You were grieving. Your wife just died. You were 26 and your whole world had just fallen apart. Thomas looked at her, really looked at her, and Evelyn saw herself reflected in his expression. The same wariness, the same walls built from years of protecting yourself from hope. Where were you living? He asked suddenly. When you were at St. Bridget's? What was it like? Evelyn didn't want to tell him, didn't want to describe the cold dormitories, the thin blankets, the way the nuns meant well but were overwhelmed by too many children and not enough resources. But she found herself talking anyway, the memories spilling out. She told him about Sister Margaret, who'd been kind, about the other kids who'd come and gone, most getting adopted, some aging out like she eventually had, about the pulsera, the bracelet, and how she'd hidden it when other kids tried to take it, how it was the only thing that made her feel like she'd come from somewhere. Thomas listened to every word, his hands gripping the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles went white. By day 3, Evelyn was climbing the walls. The lab would call any minute, any second. The not knowing was torture. Thomas had stopped by that morning with breakfast again. Apparently that was becoming their routine, and they'd sat in tense silence, both checking their phones obsessively. What if it's negative? Evelyn finally asked. What if I'm not her? Thomas met her eyes. Then I'll help you find out who you really are, and I'll still consider it a privilege to have met you. And if it's positive, his voice shook, then I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for lost time. The phone rang at 2:47 p.m. Thomas's phone. They both stared at it for 3 rings before he answered. This is Thomas Whitaker. Pause. Yes. Longer pause. His face went pale, then flushed. You're certain? 99.9%. His eyes found Evelyn's across the room. Thank you. Yes. Send everything to my email. He hung up. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Well, Evelyn's voice came out as a whisper. Thomas's face crumpled, tears streaming down his cheeks. You're my daughter. Rose, you're my daughter. The world tilted. Evelyn heard a sound like rushing water in her ears. 25 years of believing she was unwanted, unloved, fundamentally broken. And it had all been a lie. She had a father. She'd always had a father, and he'd never stopped looking for her. Evelyn didn't remember standing up, didn't remember crossing the room, but suddenly she was in Thomas's arms, and they were both crying, holding onto each other like drowning people who'd finally found solid ground. I've got you, Thomas kept saying. I've got you now. I've got you. For the first time in her entire life, Evelyn believed someone when they said that. The euphoria lasted exactly 4 hours. 4 hours of Thomas crying and laughing and making phone calls to lawyers about getting Evelyn's identity corrected. 4 hours of him showing her more photos of Eleanor, telling stories about their life together, painting pictures of the family she should have had. 4 hours of Evelyn sitting there numb, nodding, trying to process that her entire existence had been built on a lie. Then the reality hit. It started small, a tightness in her chest when Thomas mentioned coming home to his mansion in Savannah, a flutter of panic when he started talking about introducing her to his business partners. His friends, his world, the walls she'd spent 25 years building began closing in, and suddenly the luxurious suite felt like a cage. "I should go," she said abruptly, standing up from the couch where they'd been looking at photos. Thomas looked up, confused. "Go where?" "I don't know. My quarters. I need to think." "Evelyn. Rose. You don't have to go back there. You can stay here or we can get you another suite, or—" "Stop." The word came out sharper than she intended. "Just stop for a second." Thomas went quiet, and Evelyn could see him trying to understand, trying to be patient, but she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. 25 years of being one person, and now she was supposed to be someone else. Just like that. "I need space," she managed. "Please." He'd let her go, though she could see it killed him, and Evelyn had fled back to her tiny crew quarters, locked the door, and spent the next 3 days refusing to see or talk to him. Angela, her roommate, had returned from shore leave to find Evelyn curled up in bed, staring at the wall. "You okay? You look like death." "I'm fine." "You've been in bed for 2 days. That's not fine." Evelyn didn't answer. What could she say? "Hey, turns out I'm not actually an orphan. I'm the stolen daughter of a billionaire, and my entire identity is a lie." Thomas texted constantly. She ignored every message. He knocked on her door. She pretended to be asleep. Finally, on the 3rd day, he'd slipped a note under her door. "I'm not going anywhere. Whenever you're ready to talk, I'll be here." Dad, that word, Dad. It made something crack open in Evelyn's chest. Something she'd kept sealed tight for so long she'd forgotten it was there. And with the crack came a flood of emotion she couldn't control. Rage. That's what she felt first. Pure, burning rage. She'd spent her entire childhood being rejected, being sent back like defective merchandise, believing something was fundamentally wrong with her. And all along she'd had a father who wanted her, who'd been looking for her. Where the hell had he been when the Johnsons called her difficult? When the Petersons complained she was too withdrawn? When the Hayes family chose their biological child over her? Where had his money and resources and investigators been when she needed them? The rational part of her brain knew it wasn't Thomas's fault, knew he'd done everything humanly possible to find her. But the wounded child inside didn't care about rational. That child only knew abandonment, and no DNA test could erase 25 years of pain. On the 4th day, Thomas had apparently reached his limit. He showed up with the ship's head of security and had them unlock her door when she wouldn't answer. "Evelyn," his voice was firm but gentle. "We need to talk. I know this is overwhelming, but you can't hide forever." She'd turned to face him from her bunk, and whatever he saw in her expression made him stop short. "Where were you?" The words came out low and dangerous. "When I needed someone? Where were you when I was 6 and begging the Johnsons not to send me back? Where were you when I was 8 and Mrs. Peterson told me I was too broken to love? Where were you when I was 12 and the Hayes family chose their real daughter over me?" Thomas's face went pale. "I was looking for you. Every single day I was—" "Well, you didn't look hard enough." The rage exploded out of her. "You with all your money and connections and resources, and you couldn't find one little girl? I was right there, in the system, in orphanages and foster homes, and you couldn't find me. The paperwork was falsified. Your birth date, your birthplace, everything. Frances Delaney made sure." "I don't care about Frances Delaney." Evelyn was on her feet now, 25 years of pain pouring out. "I care that I spent my entire life thinking nobody wanted me. Do you know what that does to a kid? Do you have any idea what it's like to believe you're so fundamentally unlovable that even people who signed up to be parents couldn't stand you? You're not unlovable." Thomas's voice cracked. "You never were. I loved you from the moment you were born. I've loved you every single day since. Then why does it feel like my whole life was a waste?" Evelyn's voice broke. 25 years of survival, of building walls, of protecting myself because nobody else would. And now you're telling me none of it had to happen, that I had a father who wanted me all along. "I know." Thomas stepped closer, tears streaming down his face. "I know it's not fair. I know I can't give you back those years, but I'm here now. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. What if I can't do this? Evelyn whispered. What if I don't know how to be your daughter? What if I'm too broken? You're not broken. Thomas's voice was fierce. What happened to you? What Francis did? What the system did? That wasn't your fault. You survived. You're strong. And if you're broken, then so am I. Because I've spent 25 years as half a person. Evelyn sank back onto her bunk, the rage draining out as quickly as it came, leaving only exhaustion. I don't know who I am anymore. My whole identity was built on being the orphan nobody wanted, and now that's gone and I don't know what's left. Thomas sat beside her carefully, like she might bolt. Then we'll figure it out together. You don't have to be anyone right now. You don't have to have all the answers. You keep saying we, like this is something we're doing together, but we're strangers. DNA doesn't change that. The words clearly hurt him, but he nodded. You're right. We are strangers, but I'd like the chance to change that, if you'll let me. Evelyn looked at him, really looked at him. She saw her own eyes staring back, the same shape, the same color. She saw the exhaustion in his face, the grief, the desperate hope. He'd lost his wife and his daughter in the same night. He'd spent 25 years searching, and she was angry at him for not finding her sooner. The unfairness of it all was crushing. Tell me the truth, she said quietly. Don't sugarcoat it. Tell me exactly what happened the night I was taken. Thomas took a shaky breath and told her everything. Every detail. Eleanor's death, his shock, the paperwork, leaving the baby in the nursery for 20 minutes, coming back to emptiness, the investigation, Francis Delaney's disappearance, the dead ends. I failed you, he finished. I should have never left you alone. I should have... You were grieving. That's not an excuse. Yes, it is. Evelyn's voice was tired. You lost your wife. You were 26 years old and your wife died and you were trying to process that. You didn't fail me. Francis Delaney failed me. The hospital failed me. The system failed me. But you tried. You never stopped trying. Thomas buried his face in his hands. I'm so sorry for all of it. For not finding you. For everything you went through. I'm so goddamn sorry. And watching this man, her father, break down, Evelyn felt something shift. The rage was still there, and the confusion, and the bone-deep exhaustion. But underneath it all was something else. Something that felt dangerously like hope. I need time, she said finally. I need time to process all of this. Can you give me that? Thomas looked up. As much as you need. But can I ask one thing? What? Don't shut me out completely. You need space. I'll give you space. But let me be here. Let me try. Evelyn nodded slowly. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't acceptance. But it was a start. And maybe, after 25 years of walls, a start was all either of them could ask for. 2 weeks later, Evelyn stood in the foyer of Thomas's Savannah mansion, her single duffel bag looking pathetically small against the marble floors and crystal chandeliers. The cruise had ended days ago, and after much negotiation, she'd agreed to stay with him temporarily, just until she figured things out. The mansion was obscene. 12 bedrooms, a pool that could host the Olympics, a garage with cars worth more than most people's houses. Thomas had given her an awkward tour, pointing out rooms like he was a realtor, not her father. This is the library. The gym is downstairs. Your room is the third door on the left. Her room, like she belonged here. Evelyn had dropped her bag and immediately felt suffocated by the sheer size of it all. The bedroom was bigger than the apartment she'd rented after aging out of foster care. The bathroom had heated floors. Heated floors. Who needed that? I'll let you get settled, Thomas had said, hovering in the doorway like he wasn't sure he was allowed to enter. If you need anything, I'm fine. He'd left, and Evelyn had spent the first night in that enormous bed feeling more alone than she had in the crew quarters. The distance between them felt insurmountable. Thomas tried. God, he tried. He hired a therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, who specialized in family reunification. He showed Evelyn more photos of Eleanor. He cooked breakfast every morning, though he was terrible at it and they both knew it. He asked careful questions about her life, her interests, What she wanted to do now that she didn't have to work on the cruise ship. Evelyn answered in monosyllables and spent most of her time hiding in her room. The breaking point came 3 weeks in, when a delivery truck arrived with boxes upon boxes of designer clothes. "What is this?" Evelyn asked, standing in the foyer surrounded by shopping bags from stores she couldn't even pronounce. Thomas looked sheepish. "I thought you might need some things. You've been wearing the same 3 outfits since you got here, so you bought me a new wardrobe without asking. I just wanted you to be comfortable." "Comfortable?" Evelyn's voice rose. "You think throwing money at me is going to make this easier? That's not what I'm doing." "Yes, it is. Designer clothes, this mansion, the car you're trying to give me. You think you can buy me? Like I'm something you can just purchase and fix?" Thomas's face flushed. "That's not fair. I'm trying to help." "I don't need your help. I don't need your money. I need—" She stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. What did she need? A time machine. 25 years back. Parents who hadn't been stolen from her. "What?" Thomas pressed. "Tell me what you need and I'll do it." "I need you to stop trying so hard," the words burst out. "I need space to breathe. I need to not feel like a charity case you're trying to fix." The hurt on his face was immediate and devastating. "You're not a charity case. You're my daughter. I'm a stranger who shares your DNA. That's all." Thomas recoiled like she'd slapped him. "Is that really what you think? What else am I supposed to think? You keep calling me Rose. That's not my name. My name is Evelyn. Evelyn Marlowe. That's who I've been for 25 years. Marlowe isn't even your real last name. It's what the orphanage gave you. It's the only name I've ever known." They were both shouting now, years of pain and frustration spilling over. The staff had quietly disappeared, giving them privacy for the explosion that had been building since that night on the cruise. "I can't do this," Evelyn said finally, her voice breaking. "I can't pretend to be your daughter when I don't even know how." "Then don't pretend." Thomas's voice was raw. "Just be you. That's all I want. You want the daughter you lost. But she doesn't exist. She never got to exist because Francis Delaney stole her. You're right here. You're alive. I'm not her." Evelyn was crying now, hot, angry tears. "I'm not the daughter you were supposed to have. I'm the product of 7 failed foster homes and a broken system. I'm damaged goods, Thomas. That's what I am. Stop it." He crossed the distance between them, and for the first time, touched her, his hands on her shoulders, firm but gentle. "Stop saying that. You're not damaged. You're a survivor. You're strong and you're here and you're mine." Evelyn wanted to pull away, wanted to run, but something in his voice, in the way he said mine, made her freeze. "I don't know how to trust this," she whispered. "Everyone I've ever trusted has sent me back. I will never send you back. Never. You can hate me. You can scream at me. You can push me away. But I'm not going anywhere. You say that now. I'll say it every day for the rest of my life if that's what it takes." They stood there in the foyer surrounded by designer shopping bags neither of them cared about anymore. Evelyn felt exhausted down to her bones. "I need therapy," she said finally. "Real therapy. Not just family reunification. I need to deal with everything that happened before I can even think about being your daughter." "Okay, whatever you need. And I need my own space. Not this mansion. Something smaller. Somewhere I can breathe." Thomas nodded, though she could see it hurt. "There's a guest house on the property. 2 bedrooms. You'd still be close but have your own space. And you have to stop buying me things. If I need something, I'll ask. Deal. And stop calling me Rose. Not yet. Maybe someday. But not yet." That one clearly killed him, but he nodded. "Evelyn it is." She took a shaky breath. "I'm not promising this will work. I'm not promising I'll ever be the daughter you want. You already are." His voice was fierce. "You're exactly the daughter I want. The one who survived. The one who's standing here fighting. That's my girl." Something cracked in Evelyn's chest at those words. My girl. She couldn't remember anyone ever calling her that. Certainly not with that much conviction. That much pride. The tears came harder, and this time when Thomas pulled her into a hug, she didn't pull away. She let herself collapse into his arms and cry for everything, for the mother she never knew, for the childhood that was stolen, for the 25 years of loneliness that didn't have to happen. Thomas held her and cried too, and for the first time since that night on the cruise, the distance between them felt a little bit smaller. Later that night, Evelyn sat in Dr. Chen's office for their first solo session. Thomas had offered to come, but she'd needed to do this alone. "Tell me about your earliest memory," Dr. Chen said. Evelyn closed her eyes. "I was 3, maybe 4, at St. Bridget's. Sister Margaret found me hiding under my bed, clutching the bracelet. I'd had a nightmare about someone taking it. She sat with me until I fell back asleep. The bracelet was important to you. It was the only thing that was mine. The only proof I came from somewhere. And now you know where you came from." "Yeah," Evelyn opened her eyes. "And I don't know what to do with that information." Dr. Chen leaned forward. "You don't have to do anything with it yet. Right now, you just have to survive it. One day at a time. Everyone keeps saying that, one day at a time. Like it's that simple. It's not simple, but it is doable. You've survived harder things." Had she? Evelyn wasn't sure. This felt different. This felt like her entire foundation had been pulled out from under her, and she was free-falling with no idea where she'd land. But maybe that was okay. Maybe free-falling was better than being trapped in a lie for 25 years. "Thomas is trying so hard," Evelyn said quietly, "and I keep pushing him away. That's a normal response to trauma, pushing away before you can be rejected. But he won't reject me. He keeps saying that. Do you believe him?" Evelyn thought about Thomas's face in the foyer. The absolute conviction when he'd said, "You're mine." She thought about the investigation files, 25 years of searching. She thought about the way he'd held her while she cried. "I'm starting to," she admitted. Dr. Chen smiled. "That's a good place to start." The call came on a Tuesday morning, 3 months after Evelyn had moved into the guest house. She was making coffee, had finally figured out how Thomas liked his, 2 sugars and a splash of cream. When his phone rang in the main house, she could hear his voice through the open window, tense and clipped. "When are you certain?" "I see. Yes. Send me everything." He appeared at her door minutes later, his face ashen. "They found her," he said without preamble. "Frances Delaney, or rather, they found out what happened to her." Evelyn's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. "What do you mean?" "She died last year, cancer. But before she died, she confessed to a priest in Mississippi. Told him everything about taking you. The kitchen suddenly felt too small. She's dead." The priest couldn't break confession, but he left anonymous tips for the police. The information got buried in bureaucracy between 3 states. It only just made it to the detective handling your case. Evelyn set down her cup before she could drop it. A year ago, Frances Delaney had been dying a year ago, right around the time Evelyn was serving champagne to millionaires and counting money for a private investigator. What did she say? In the confession. Thomas pulled out his phone, hands shaking slightly. The detective sent a summary. The priest couldn't give specifics, but he confirmed enough details. Frances had suffered multiple miscarriages. 3 babies, all lost in the 2nd trimester. She'd been seeing a therapist but stopped treatment. The night she took you, she was having a psychotic break. So she was crazy. Evelyn's voice came out flat. She was sick, mentally ill. The therapist's notes, they subpoenaed them, showed severe depression, possible psychosis. She became obsessed with the idea that she was meant to save a baby who would otherwise be abandoned or unwanted. I wasn't unwanted. No. But she saw your mother die, saw me in shock, barely functioning. In her fractured mind, she convinced herself she was rescuing you. Evelyn sat heavily in one of the kitchen chairs. All these years, she'd imagined Frances as some kind of monster, a villain who'd stolen her for money or spite or pure evil. But a sick woman having a mental breakdown, that was somehow worse. That meant there was no one to hate, no clear target for her rage. "There's more," Thomas continued, his voice careful. "According to the confession, Frances kept you for 3 months, tried to be your mother, but the guilt and fear ate at her. She couldn't sleep, couldn't think. She was terrified of being caught, so she created false documents and took you to St. Bridget's. She left me there on purpose." "Yes, and Evelyn," Thomas paused, something complicated crossing his face. "She left the bracelet on purpose too. She said in the confession that she hoped someday Somehow, we'd find each other, that the bracelet would bring you back to me. The words hung in the air like smoke. Evelyn couldn't process them. Francis had stolen her, ruined 3 lives, but left a breadcrumb trail. What the hell was that supposed to mean? So she felt guilty, Evelyn said bitterly. Great. That makes everything better. It doesn't make anything better, but it explains why we couldn't find you. She was careful, methodical even in her illness. The false birth certificate. The state changes. The timing. She knew how to hide you. And then she lived 25 years with her secret. Not well, according to the detective. She never held another job. Moved constantly. Had no friends or family. The priest said her dying confession lasted hours. She wanted to make sure someone knew the truth. Evelyn stood abruptly and walked to the window overlooking the garden. The roses were blooming. Thomas had planted them everywhere after finding her. Roses in every color. Eleanor's flower. Her flower technically, though she still couldn't quite connect herself to the name Rose. I don't know how to feel about this, she admitted. I want to be angry, but she's dead. I want to hate her, but she was sick. I want someone to blame. But who? The hospital that had bad security. The therapist who didn't hospitalize her. The system that lost track of me. Thomas came to stand beside her. You can be angry at all of it. At her. At the situation. At the sheer cosmic unfairness. You don't have to forgive anyone. But you do, don't you? You've already forgiven her. He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know if it's forgiveness, but I spent 25 years hating her, imagining what I'd do if I ever found her. And now she's just gone. Dead and buried in some pauper's grave in Mississippi. My hatred doesn't hurt her anymore. It only hurts me. The rational part of Evelyn knew he was right. But the wounded child inside wanted someone to pay, wanted justice, wanted something to make sense of the senseless. A notification buzzed on Thomas's phone. He glanced at it, and his expression darkened. What now? Richard Thornton, one of the investigators I hired 15 years ago. He's requesting a meeting. Says he has information about your case. After all this time, that's convenient. Thomas's jaw clenched. Too convenient. They met Thornton that afternoon at a coffee shop downtown. He was exactly what Evelyn expected. Mid-50s, cheap suit, the look of a man who'd made a career out of other people's desperation. Mr. Whitaker. Well, I guess it's Whitaker now, isn't it? He smiled oily. Congratulations on your reunion, truly heartwarming. What do you want, Richard? Thomas's voice was ice. Just tying up loose ends, see? I did some digging back in the day. Came across information about an infant matching your daughter's description at St. Bridget's. But the paperwork didn't quite add up. And you know how those church organizations are. Very protective of their records. Evelyn felt Thomas go rigid beside her. You knew where she was. I suspected, but I couldn't confirm without more resources. More time, more money. Thornton's smile widened. I tried to reach out to your office, but you'd stopped returning my calls by then. Moved on to other investigators. How much? Thomas's voice was deadly quiet. I'm sorry. How much money do you want to make this go away? Because I know blackmail when I hear it. Thornton had the audacity to look offended. I'm not blackmailing anyone. I'm simply reminding you that I did work on this case. Work that ultimately contributed to finding your daughter. A small consulting fee for my years of service seems reasonable. Say $500,000. Evelyn watched Thomas's face cycle through rage, disgust, and calculation. Then, to her surprise, he laughed. You know what the funny thing is? Richard, you're probably not even lying. You probably did suspect something about St. Bridget's. And if you'd followed through, if you'd done your job instead of giving up and moving on to the next paying client, you might have found her. You might have saved us both years of pain. So we have a deal. No, we have a lawsuit. For negligence, for malpractice, and for attempted extortion. My lawyers will be in touch. Thornton's face went red. You can't prove... I can prove you took my money and didn't follow obvious leads. I can prove you're trying to profit off my daughter's trauma. And I can make sure you never work in this city again. Thomas stood, dropping money on the table for their untouched coffees. Come on, Evelyn. We're done here. Outside, Evelyn found herself shaking with adrenaline. Did that actually just happen? Unfortunately, there's always someone trying to profit off tragedy. Thomas pulled out his phone. I'm calling my lawyer. Thornton's not the first investigator who failed me, but he's the first one stupid enough to try blackmail. You would have paid him, wouldn't you, to make him go away? Thomas looked at her seriously. A year ago, maybe. But you've taught me something these past months. Some things you don't compromise on, some things you fight for. That evening, back at the guest house, Evelyn pulled up everything she could find about Frances Delaney online. There wasn't much. A few old addresses, a mention in a church bulletin from years ago, an obituary with no photo and no listed survivors. Frances Marie Delaney, 52, passed away peacefully. She will be remembered by those who knew her. Would she? Would anyone remember her except as the woman who stole a baby? Was that fair when she'd been sick, broken by grief and mental illness? Evelyn looked down at the bracelet on her wrist. Frances had left it deliberately, a beacon in the dark, a terrible, inadequate, too late apology wrapped in silver. She didn't forgive Frances. Maybe she never would. But she was starting to understand that forgiveness wasn't always the point. Sometimes survival was enough. Sometimes moving forward meant accepting that some questions would never have satisfying answers. Her phone buzzed. A text from Thomas. Made Eleanor's pot roast. Probably inedible. But you're welcome to come mock my cooking and tell me about your day? Evelyn smiled. Despite everything. 3 months ago, she couldn't have imagined this. Texting with her father about dinner. Being part of someone's day-to-day life, she typed back. Be there in 10. And yes, your cooking is terrible. His response came immediately. That's my girl. And for the first time, reading those words didn't make her want to run. The shift happened in small moments, so gradual that Evelyn almost didn't notice. It was Thomas learning how she took her coffee. Black, no sugar, exactly like Eleanor apparently. And having it ready every morning. It was him teaching her to cook Eleanor's recipes. Both of them laughing when they burned the chicken, because they got distracted, arguing about whether the oven temperature was right. It was the way he'd started leaving notes around the guest house. Went to the store. Need anything? And there's leftover pizza in the fridge, help yourself. And once, simply, proud of you. She'd kept that last one, tucked into the drawer of her nightstand. 6 months after moving to Savannah, Evelyn had started working at the foundation Thomas had created, the Rose Foundation for Missing Children. The name still made her uncomfortable, but the work didn't. They helped families navigate the nightmare of missing children, funded better hospital security systems, and lobbied for improved databases to track and reunite stolen kids. Evelyn had thought it would feel exploitative, using her story for publicity, but the first time a mother called crying because they'd found her son after 8 years, found him because of technology the foundation funded, Evelyn understood. Her pain could prevent someone else's. That meant something. She was reviewing case files in Thomas's home office one afternoon when he knocked on the open door. Got a minute? She looked up. He was holding something small, wrapped in tissue paper. What's that? Found it in storage. Thought you might want to see. He handed it to her carefully, like it might break. Evelyn unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a tiny knitted hat, soft yellow yarn, slightly moth-eaten, the kind hospitals put on newborns. You were wearing that, Thomas said quietly. When you were born, Eleanor made it. She learned to knit when she was pregnant, even though she was terrible at it. That hat was crooked and full of holes, but she was so proud. Evelyn traced the uneven stitches with her finger. Eleanor had made this, had held the yarn and needles while Evelyn grew inside her, had imagined the baby who would wear it. I thought everything was gone, she whispered. I kept a box, just a few things, the hat, the hospital bracelet, the outfit I'd bought for bringing you home. He paused. I couldn't look at it for years, but I couldn't throw it away either. Can I see? The rest of it. Thomas disappeared and returned with a shoebox, battered and faded. Inside were treasures. The hospital bracelet with baby girl Whitaker, printed in faded ink. A onesie with ducks on it. A rattle that had never been rattled. And photographs. So many photographs. Eleanor pregnant, glowing despite obvious discomfort. Thomas with his hand on her belly, both of them laughing. Ultrasound images. the hospital room before everything went wrong, and at the bottom, a journal. Eleanor's handwriting on the cover. For our Rose. I didn't know this existed, Thomas said, as Evelyn lifted it out. Found it in Eleanor's things, months after. She must have been writing it during the pregnancy. Evelyn opened to the first page. Dear Rose, today we found out you're a girl. Your father cried. He'll deny it, but he absolutely cried. We're going to paint your nursery yellow because neither of us can agree on anything else. Your father wants to name you Catherine after his grandmother. I want Rose after my favorite flower. We'll probably argue about it until you arrive, and then pick something completely different. But whoever you become, whatever we call you, you should know. You're already so loved. The entries continued. Eleanor's hopes, her fears, her excitement, plans for the nursery, worries about being a good mother, a list of lullabies she wanted to sing, dreams for her daughter's future. The last entry was dated 2 days before Eleanor died. Rose, I'm scared. The doctors say there might be complications, but I want you to know, if anything happens, this was worth it. You're worth it. I'd do it all again just to bring you into this world. And your father, he's going to be lost without me, but he'll love you enough for both of us. I know he will. Be patient with him. He's going to need you as much as you need him. Evelyn's vision blurred. She felt Thomas's hand on her shoulder, steady and warm. She fought so hard for you, he said, his voice thick. 19 hours of labor, and she never once said she wanted to stop. Even when the doctors offered a C-section early on, she refused because she wanted to do it the way nature intended. She was stubborn like that. I'm sorry, Evelyn managed. I'm sorry you lost her. Me too, every single day. He squeezed her shoulder. But I'm grateful I found you. Eleanor would want that. She'd want us to be a family. The word hung between them. Family. 6 months ago. It would have sent Evelyn running now. It just felt like truth. Tell me more about her, Evelyn said. Not the big things, the small things. What made her laugh? What annoyed her? Thomas smiled. That sad smile that meant he was remembering. She had this ridiculous laugh, like a snort-giggle combination that she hated. Made her sound like a goose, she said, and she was terrible at directions. Couldn't find her way out of a paper bag. We'd be driving somewhere and she'd insist she knew the way. And 30 minutes later we'd be completely lost. What else? She sang off-key, loved mystery novels but always guessed the ending wrong. Could eat her weight in chocolate, cried at commercials, didn't matter what they were advertising. If there was a remotely emotional moment, waterworks. Evelyn listened to him talk about Eleanor. Not the perfect memory, but the real woman, flawed and funny and human. The mother she'd never known but was starting to understand. I wish I could have met her, she said finally. She would have loved you, the real you, exactly as you are. Something cracked open in Evelyn's chest. That last wall she'd been holding on to. I need to tell you something. Thomas waited. That night on the cruise, when you first saw the bracelet, I almost ran. I almost told you it was none of your business and walked away. I know, I could see it. And these past 6 months, there have been so many times I wanted to pack up and disappear. Go back to being alone because it's easier than risking this. Why didn't you? Evelyn looked at him. Really looked. At the gray in his hair, the lines around his eyes, the exhaustion he carried from 25 years of searching, at the hope in his expression, the desperate, careful hope of someone who'd lost everything once and was terrified of losing it again. Because you never gave up on me, she said. Not when I was stolen. Not when I pushed you away. Not once. And I figured if you could keep fighting, maybe I could too. Thomas's eyes filled with tears. I will never give up on you. Never. I know. And that's terrifying. But it's also... She paused, searching for the right word. It's everything. They sat in his office surrounded by case files and Eleanor's memories. And for the first time, Evelyn let herself feel it. Not just the grief for what she'd lost, but the gratitude for what she'd found. She had a father. A real, imperfect, trying his best father who loved her. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For not stopping. For looking. For 25 years of not giving up. Thomas pulled her into a hug, and Evelyn let herself collapse into it. No more walls. No more running. Just this. arms around her, solid and real and safe. "There's somewhere I want to take you," Thomas said when they finally pulled apart. "If you're ready." "Where?" "Eleanor's grave. I go every year on your birthday. I'd like you to come with me this time." Evelyn's heart stuttered. She'd been avoiding the cemetery, avoiding the reality of the mother buried there, but looking at Thomas's hopeful, nervous face, she knew she couldn't avoid it forever. "Okay," she said. "I'm ready." The cemetery was quiet on a Thursday morning, the kind of peaceful that felt intentional. Ancient oak trees provided shade over neat rows of headstones. And somewhere nearby, a bird sang something that sounded like a question. Evelyn's hands were shaking. Thomas drove them in silence, respecting the weight of the moment. They'd stopped at a florist on the way, and now the back seat was filled with white roses, 25 of them. One for each year Evelyn had been missing, plus one more. "For this year," Thomas had said quietly, "the year we found each other." Now, as they walked through the cemetery gates, Evelyn felt like she might throw up. This was real. Eleanor was real. Not just photos and stories and a journal written to a baby who'd disappeared. A real woman who died so Evelyn could live, buried in the ground they were walking on. "It's just up ahead," Thomas said, his voice gentle. "We can take our time, or we can leave if you're not ready." "I'm ready." The words came out stronger than she felt. "I need to do this." Eleanor's grave was in a section near a small pond, under a weeping willow. The headstone was simple gray marble with elegant script. Eleanor Marie Whitaker, beloved wife and mother, 1973-1999. She gave everything so her daughter could live. Evelyn's knees nearly buckled. "Mother," the headstone said mother, even though Eleanor had never gotten to be one, even though she'd died hours after giving birth. Thomas had made sure the world knew. She was a mother. "I had it changed," Thomas said quietly, noticing where Evelyn's eyes had caught. "After I found you, the original just said beloved wife. But that wasn't the whole truth. She was your mother. Even if she never got the chance to hold you more than once." Evelyn couldn't speak. She just stared at the headstone, at her mother's name, at the dates that marked a life cut impossibly short. Thomas knelt and began arranging the roses, his movements practiced from years of this ritual. "I usually talk to her," he said, not looking at Evelyn. "Tell her about my year, about the business, about how I'm still looking for you." He paused. "Except last year. Last year I told her I'd found you. I sat here for 3 hours and told her everything. What did you say? That you were alive. That you were beautiful. That you had her eyes and her stubborn streak." His voice cracked. "That I was sorry it took me so long. That I hoped she could forgive me." Evelyn knelt beside him, her hand instinctively going to the bracelet at her wrist. The bracelet Eleanor had seen her wear just once in those brief moments after birth before everything fell apart. "Hi, Mom." The word felt foreign on her tongue, but right somehow. "I'm sorry it took me this long to visit. I was scared. I didn't know what to say to someone I never met, but who gave up everything for me." The bird sang again, and the willow branches swayed in a breeze that smelled like rain. "I read your journal," Evelyn continued, tears starting to fall. "The one you wrote for me. You were so excited. You had all these plans, teaching me to garden, reading me mystery novels even though Dad says you were terrible at guessing the endings, singing me lullabies off-key." Thomas made a sound between a laugh and a sob. "I wish I could have known you. I wish I could remember your voice, your smell, anything. But all I have are stories and photos and this bracelet." Evelyn touched it, the silver warm from her skin. "Francis left it with me. I don't know if that was mercy or cruelty, but it brought me back to Dad eventually. So maybe you were watching out for me somehow. Maybe you made sure I'd find my way home." She couldn't stop crying now. 25 years of grief pouring out. For the mother she'd never known. For the childhood that had been stolen. For all the moments they should have shared. First days of school, scraped knees, teenage heartbreaks, graduations. "I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me," Evelyn whispered. "I'm sorry I grew up angry and broken and convinced I was unlovable. I'm sorry it took this long to understand that you loved me enough to die for me. That's the biggest love there is. And I took 25 years to understand it." Thomas wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and they knelt together in the grass, both crying for Eleanor and for all the lost time. "She would be so proud of you." Thomas said finally. "The woman you've become, despite everything. The strength, the resilience, the way you're helping other families through the foundation." Eleanor would see all of that and know her sacrifice meant something. "I'm trying," Evelyn managed. "I'm trying to be someone she'd be proud of." "You already are." They stayed for over an hour, taking turns sharing memories. Thomas of his life with Eleanor, Evelyn of her childhood, both of them painting a picture of what should have been and what actually was, the good and the bad, the painful and the beautiful. Evelyn told Eleanor about the 7 foster families, about St. Bridget's, about Sister Margaret who'd been kind, about the ocean star and the night everything changed, about the past 6 months learning to be Thomas's daughter, learning to trust, learning that family wasn't just biology but choice. "I'm choosing this," Evelyn said, looking at the headstone. "I'm choosing to be his daughter, your daughter. I'm choosing this family, even though it's broken and incomplete and nothing like what it should have been, because it's mine, and I want it." The words hung in the air, a promise and a declaration. Thomas pulled her closer, and Evelyn leaned into him, finally, truly letting herself belong. "Thank you," Thomas whispered, and Evelyn knew he was talking to both of them, to her and to Eleanor. "Thank you for fighting to bring her into this world. Thank you for never giving up. Thank you for this moment." When they finally stood to leave, Evelyn placed the last rose on the grave, the 26th one, for this year, the year everything changed. "I'll come back," she promised Eleanor. "I won't wait another 25 years. I'll visit and tell you about my life, about Dad, about everything. You might be gone, but you're still my mom. That doesn't change." As they walked back toward the car, Thomas's hand found hers. Evelyn squeezed it and he squeezed back. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, I think I am." And surprisingly, it was true. The grief was still there, would always be there, but it wasn't drowning her anymore. It was just part of her story, like the bracelet, like the journal, like the imperfect, beautiful family she'd found. They drove home in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes when words aren't necessary anymore. Evelyn looked out the window at Savannah passing by, this city that was becoming home, this life that was becoming hers. Her phone buzzed, a text from Dr. Chen. "How did the cemetery visit go?" Evelyn typed back, hard, but good. "Really good." Another text came through, this one from Angela, her old roommate from the Ocean Star. "Saw you on the Foundation website. Look at you, changing the world. Proud of you, girl." Then Marcus, "Heard you're making a difference. Always knew you were special." And finally Thomas, even though he was driving right next to her. "Love you, kiddo. Your mom would too." Evelyn smiled through fresh tears. She typed back, "Love you too, Dad." It was the first time she'd called him that in a text. The first time she'd said it without hesitation or fear. Just simple truth. He was her dad. She was his daughter. And despite everything that had tried to destroy them, they'd found their way back to each other when they got home. Thomas made hot chocolate, terribly with too many marshmallows and not enough actual chocolate, and they sat on the back porch watching the sun set over the garden full of roses. "What are you thinking about?" Thomas asked. Evelyn touched the bracelet at her wrist. That sometimes the worst things lead to the best things. That being stolen was horrible, but it brought me here, to you, to knowing about Mom, to having a purpose with the foundation. I wouldn't wish what happened on anyone, but I can't regret where it led. That's very wise. Dr. Chen says I'm making progress. Dr. Chen is right. They sat in comfortable silence until the stars came out, father and daughter. Finally home. 1 year after the cruise, Evelyn stood at the podium in the Atlanta Convention Center, looking out at 300 faces, foster parents, social workers, child advocates, families who'd lost children to the system or to kidnappers, people who understood, in one way or another, what it meant to have a child disappear. "My name is Evelyn Whitaker," she began, and the name still felt new on her tongue, still carried weight. And I spent the first 25 years of my life believing I was unwanted. The audience was silent, attentive. In the front row, Thomas sat with his phone out, recording like the proud dad he'd become. Beside him was Dr. Chen, who'd helped navigate Evelyn through the hardest year of her life. I went through 7 foster families, 7 different homes where I tried to be good enough, quiet enough, normal enough to keep, and every single time, I got sent back. By the time I aged out of the system at 18, I'd built walls so high that nobody could reach me. I was convinced the problem was me, that I was fundamentally broken, fundamentally unlovable. She paused, gathering courage for the next part. But I wasn't abandoned. I was stolen, taken from a hospital nursery by a mentally ill woman who thought she was saving me. And my father, her voice caught. My father spent 25 years looking for me. Every single day. He never stopped. Thomas's eyes were already wet. Evelyn had warned him she was going to tell their story, but he cried every time anyway. The Rose Foundation exists because of what happened to me, but more importantly, because of what shouldn't happen to anyone else. We've helped reunite 43 families in the past year. We've funded database improvements in 12 states. We've trained hospital staff, improved security protocols, and lobbied for better tracking of children in the foster system. The audience applauded, but Evelyn raised a hand. But here's what I really want to say. To every foster kid listening, every adoptee, every person who's ever felt unwanted, you're not broken. The system that failed you is broken. The adults who should have protected you and didn't, they're broken. But you're survivors. And surviving is its own kind of strength. She looked directly at Thomas. It took me 25 years to learn that being vulnerable isn't weakness, that accepting love doesn't make you dependent, that family isn't just the people you're born to. It's the people who choose you and who you choose back. Every single day. The applause was thunderous. Evelyn stepped off the podium on shaking legs, and Thomas was there immediately, pulling her into a hug. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. "So incredibly proud. Couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have. You're stronger than you know." Dr. Chen approached, smiling. "That was powerful, Evelyn. How do you feel?" "Terrified. Relieved, like I might throw up." All normal responses to public speaking and emotional vulnerability. They'd come a long way in a year. The therapy sessions had been brutal at first. Unpacking 25 years of trauma, learning to trust, learning to accept that she deserved love. There had been setbacks, nights where Evelyn had packed her bags, convinced she should leave before Thomas inevitably sent her away, fights where old wounds reopened and they both said things they regretted, but they'd worked through it together. "We have a surprise for you," Thomas said as they walked toward the exit. "Actually, it was supposed to be a surprise, but I'm terrible at keeping secrets from you." "What kind of surprise?" "The good kind. Come on." He drove them to a neighborhood Evelyn didn't recognize. Tree-lined streets with modest homes. He pulled up in front of a small blue house with a white picket fence and a "for sale" sign in the yard. "What are we doing here?" Evelyn asked. "You said you wanted your own place, somewhere that was yours, not mine. Not the guest house, so I found this. 2 bedrooms, updated kitchen, walking distance to the foundation office. And before you get mad, I'm not buying it for you. I'm helping with the down payment. You'll make the mortgage payments. It'll be in your name, completely yours." Evelyn stared at the house. It was perfect. Small enough to not feel overwhelming, big enough to grow into. A front porch where she could drink coffee, a yard where maybe someday she'd plant roses. "Can we look inside?" she asked quietly. Thomas produced a key. "The realtor is a friend. Said we could check it out." The house was empty but full of potential. Hardwood floors, big windows, a kitchen that actually had counter space. Evelyn walked through each room, imagining furniture, imagining a life. "What do you think?" Thomas asked, hanging back to let her explore. "I think I want it. I think I want this." Yeah. She turned to him, tears threatening again. "A year ago, I was sleeping in crew quarters on a cruise ship, saving every dollar to hire an investigator, and now I'm looking at a house. My house. With my dad. It's surreal. Good surreal or bad surreal. The best kind of surreal." They sat on the empty living room floor, backs against the wall, looking out at the front yard. "I'm scared I'm going to mess this up," Evelyn admitted. "The house, the foundation work, us. I've never had anything stable before. What if I sabotage it? Then we'll work through it." That's what family does. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it's doable, and you're not alone in it anymore. Evelyn leaned her head on his shoulder. Thank you for everything, for not giving up, for being patient, for teaching me that I'm not broken. You taught me too. You taught me that it's never too late, that love can survive 25 years of separation, that family is worth fighting for even when it's hard. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Saw your speech online? You're a badass. Proud to know you. Then Angela. That speech. I'm crying at work. You're changing lives? Evelyn. Then a number she didn't recognize. This is Sister Margaret from St. Bridget's. One of the staff showed me your speech. I always knew you were special. So proud of the woman you've become. Evelyn showed Thomas the messages, her eyes wet. People are proud of me. That's still so weird. Get used to it. You're making a real difference. That evening, back at Thomas's house, though Evelyn was already mentally preparing to move into her own, they had dinner together. Thomas had actually managed to cook something edible, and they ate on the back porch, surrounded by roses in every color. I've been thinking, Evelyn said, twirling pasta on her fork, about the bracelet. What about it? I don't need to wear it anymore. I know where I came from now. I know who I am. The bracelet did its job. It brought us together, but maybe it's time to let it rest. Thomas nodded slowly. What were you thinking? There's a safety deposit box at the foundation office. We keep important documents there. Founding papers, that kind of thing. I thought maybe the bracelet should go there too. Part of our story, part of our history. So other families can see it and know that sometimes, against all odds, people find their way home. Eleanor would love that. Using it to give other people hope, Evelyn unclasped the bracelet and held it in her palm. One last time. The silver had been polished recently, the rose pendant gleaming. 25 years it had been with her, the only constant in a life full of changes. Thank you, she whispered to it, to Eleanor, to whatever force had kept it safe all these years. Thank you for bringing me home. She put it in its velvet box, and somehow, instead of feeling empty, she felt free. Later that night, lying in bed in the guest house she'd soon leave, Evelyn thought about the past year. The pain and the healing, the fights and the reconciliations, the slow, difficult process of learning to be someone's daughter. It hadn't been perfect. There were still hard days, still moments when the old fears crept in, but there were also good days, great days, days when she and Thomas laughed until they cried, days when she felt genuinely, impossibly happy. Her phone lit up one last time. Thomas, good night, sweetheart. Love you. Evelyn smiled and typed back. Love you too, Dad. See you for terrible breakfast tomorrow. Hey, my pancakes are improving. They're really not. Fair enough, night, kiddo. Evelyn set down her phone and looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, maybe Eleanor was watching. Maybe she knew her sacrifice hadn't been in vain, that her daughter had survived and was finally, truly thriving. I'm okay, Mom, Evelyn whispered to the night. We're okay. Both of us. The bracelet might be going into storage, but its legacy lived on, in the foundation helping other families, in the father and daughter who'd found each other against impossible odds, in the truth that some bonds can't be broken, even by 25 years and 1,000 miles. Not every story has a perfect ending, but some stories have true ones, and truth, painful and beautiful and complicated as it is, always finds a way to set you free.